Carbohydrates pre-workout, carbohydrates post-workout, no carbohydrates around your workout at all. What is the answer when it comes down to performance versus strength versus mass? Is there an answer?
So after today's video, our sponsor is Seed. I put a link down below for 25% off their daily synbiotic. So it's a probiotic and a prebiotic in one. So it has a really unique delivery system. So I am a fan of probiotics when you're making a change to like your diet or a lifestyle, because it can kind of help remodel that gut microbiome to help you make that shift a little bit sooner. Now, full disclaimer, they're a sponsor on this channel. That's how this channel works. It's how we're able to create amazing content. But my promise is that I only recommend products that I personally have used or currently use. So Seed down below, that is a 25% off discount link, again, for their daily synbiotic. I would probably guess that you'd notice a difference within about a week of taking it. Start noticing it digestively, you might start noticing it in other ways, but for me, I got more energy, I started sleeping better, things just seemed more regulated. So anyhow, that link down below, 25% off.
Yeah. The biggest answer is if day over day, any time of the day, you consume enough carbohydrate, it's stored up in your muscle glycogen enough such that anytime you want to train, even if you haven't had carbs yet, and if you don't have carbs right after, it's not a huge deal because the glycogen will be there. It'll power hard training and even start to potentiate some recovery afterwards. So the most important thing is having enough carbohydrate in your diet, period, in any 24-hour cycle. So here's what I mean by that. If you have full glycogen restoration chronically at 400 grams of carbs for your body weight and physical activity level, and you time everything perfectly at 100 grams of carbs a day, it doesn't matter. You will have a better result than if you didn't time it perfectly, but you're just going to be a shadow of your former self, performance, recovery-wise, growth-wise, if you're that many grams of carbs shy of 400. On the other hand, if you have 400 grams of carbs a day, you don't time a thing. 400 grams of carbs to you, it's just like going to the sushi place late at night and just cramming in 400 grams. One meal of the day. The way glycogen resynthesis works, because such a meal is going to be so slow digesting, you're going to be objectively better off in performance, recovery, and muscle growth than you would be with a perfectly timed 100 grams of carbs, just because it's enough. So first, enough. But let's say we have two people. One consumes 400 grams of carbs with one sushi meal at the end of the day, and another person does something else with that same 400. Will that something else be better? Yes. Is it okay if I explain what that something else is? The optimal strategy. So that would be consuming some kind of carbohydrates a few hours to a few minutes before the performance begins. Why a few hours to a few minutes? It really just depends on two things. One, how much carb and protein and fat or whatever you had, so that most of that carbohydrate is starting to leach into the bloodstream from the small intestines by then. You don't want to eat like a Chipotle burrito worth of carbs and then 30 minutes later start training, because it's in just your stomach at that point and nothing's gone to your bloodstream. On the other hand, if you have a Gatorade really quick, driving to train, 30 minutes ago you had a Gatorade, that is well into your bloodstream and you've done the right thing. So if it's a large meal with lots of other stuff, lots of carbs, a few hours before training. If it's a smaller meal with faster digesting carbs, less other stuff, closer training is fine, even 15 or 30 minutes before. That pre-workout meal can keep your glycogen topped off just well enough, and especially can keep your blood glucose level a little higher than normal. Blood glucose level is a big potentiator for performance. You have enough blood glucose, you're doing it. You have low blood glucose, you're going to get stopped dead in your tracks. You're going to hit a wall. So pre-workout meal, recommend it. Again, none of these are ultra important compared to eating enough carbohydrate throughout the day, but it matters by a small fraction. If someone's like, hey, the most important soccer match of my life coming up in an hour, should I just not eat anything? I'm going to be like, you should probably get some Nutri-Grain bar or something. The other factor for choosing that time is how you personally handle food in your stomach when you're training hard. Do you know any people that get like pretty vomity if they get nervous for a big workout and they've eaten?
For sure, yeah.
Some people, they just need to stay away from food before they go train. Luckily, that intramuscular glycogen from the day's eating before, from a meal 6 hours ago, it's still going to do most of the work. You'll be fine. But ideally, if you could have some food or some carbs, that'd be great. Maybe liquids are better for those people. But if you get really vomity, don't have that whole pre-workout carb situation. Don't over-index on it, because then you'll just throw up and it'll be a bad time. But some people can have look, a pretty sizable meal an hour before they train, and then they feel great through training. So pre-workout meal, number one. Number two is a post-workout meal. You're replenishing glycogen stores and putting your body back into a healing, recovering parasympathetic state by having a lot of protein and carbs after training. Those muscles that were active during the training are more sensitive to the reuptake and reassimilation of glucose from the food in the few hours after they've trained than they are later in the day. So if you have more of your carbohydrates after training than just dispersed through the day, you have some small but notable amount more of that fuel going to replenish your muscles so that you're chronically better the next day. And there's probably some sort of anabolic effect there. Quickly replenishing glycogen. Your body notes how much glycogen it has in the muscles and will titrate how much anabolism it allows the muscles to engage in. How much muscle growth is stimulated is dependent in some sense on how much glycogen you have filled out. So if you have a great workout and you go home and you do nothing for 3 hours, no food, man, your body's going to be like, yeah, we'll grow some muscle from this, but not as much as we would have if you had a nice big carb meal with protein right after training. So we're bookending our training. Pre-workout meal, post-workout meal. Pre-workout 1 to 3 hours before, depending on how digestion and stuff goes. Post-workout meal, really just like as soon as possible. Now look, if you wait 30 minutes or 45 minutes driving home after the gym before you eat carbs again and protein, it's not a big deal. But if you can have a shake right after, that's a good deal. It's starting to do something. The last thing, or second to last thing, is intra-workout carbohydrate. That is mostly reserved for people going ultra hard, like endurance sport, and oftentimes for more than an hour. So if you have a 45-minute lift, can you have some carbs and protein in your session? Yes. As a scientist, can I tell you it's making a big difference? No. It's just not enough time. Your pre-workout still has you totally covered. And now your intra-workout really just turns into your post-workout, because by the time you're done 45 minutes later, your intra-workout has just started to leach in. And so it's really a post-workout. But if you're doing about an hour and a half of training, if you're doing 2 hours of training, hardcore stuff, you're familiar with the endurance community, you're part of the endurance community. Long bike rides, long runs, these bring food with them. I know people that eat pizza crusts when
there's some literature that's now showing that like some of these endurance guys, I mean, their blood sugar is sitting, like they're cramming it. Their blood sugar is sitting between 150 and 180. Like they are pounding it. That is not healthy for the regular Joe Schmo.
It's not designed
Nobody
for health.
wants to be around 150 to 200 milligrams per deciliter blood sugar. But that's what some of these top guys are doing. Like, I mean, they're just boom. And it's for that extra 1% that they want.
Exactly. Yeah. Cross the finish line in first versus fifth. Everyone's elite, but first gets a medal and fifth gets, I don't know, still drug tested and still banned. You know how cycling works. So basically that intra workout pays dividends. And really it's just like a little bit of Gatorade and a little bit of whey protein can take you a really long way for intra workouts. You don't have to be eating pizza crusts unless you're riding for 6 hours or something. But intra workout, if your workout is an hour to 2 hours long, many people are. It's like a bottle of Gatorade and a scoop of whey protein and a lot of hydration can make a really big difference on the margins that you care about. If you care about the small differences, they become relatively big differences to you. And so there, that matters. So we have pre-workout, we have intra-workout, we have post-workout. And all the carbohydrate you eat there can be something like 50 to 60% of the carbohydrate you eat throughout the whole day. I mean, that's pre, intra, and post. You have maybe 3 other meals that you eat through the day or 2 other meals. Then for those meals, you just spread the carbohydrate roughly evenly. And I would say for many people, keep a lot of carbohydrate away from that last meal of the evening in most cases, because it'll give you so much energy that you might have trouble falling asleep and it'll create more digestive demand. So I would say ultimate carbohydrate replenishment strategies, pre, intra, post, then multiple meals have normal amount of slow digesting carbohydrates in them or whatever digestion speed. The last meal of the night, maybe a little bit more protein and a little bit less carbohydrate, because you're trying to bias your body into having amino acids to heal with through the night, but also giving a little bit less of carbs, which are the best macromolecule for energy. You don't need a lot of energy when you're going to sleep. So a little bit lower carb, calm you down a little bit, you go to sleep, everything goes really well.
Okay. 2 things that you said that I want to kind of focus on a little bit. One is going to be the parasympathetic piece that I was very interested in that you said, but I want to come back to that one. First, glucose, carbs, pre or intra. Is there even a remote anti-catabolic effect? I should say remote. Is there an anti-catabolic effect to having those carbohydrates if you're already topped off on glycogen?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not very large, but it's there. And if you engage in very frequent, very hard training, it matters. CrossFitters, endurance athletes that train 4 hours a day, some of that training, you're probably going to want some protein and carbohydrate there for the anti-catabolic effect. They have actually done an assessment of literature a little while back, and they noticed that endurance athletes hard training endurance athletes need significantly more protein than sedentary populations. And it was kind of surprised endurance athletes en masse because they were like, but we don't have big muscles. Who the hell needs this? We just need carbs, right? And endurance athletes are very good about worshiping carbs, as well as they should. Carbs are for endurance. They need more protein than they thought they did, simply because it was able to present an anti-catabolic effect. As you run or bike for 6 hours every day on average, that is a huge catabolic sink. If you eat a lot of protein, if you eat a lot of carbohydrate, that absolutely makes a difference. The good thing is most endurance athletes were already eating plenty of carbohydrate, but maybe they weren't eating a lot of protein. However, for other folks who are already eating plenty of protein, if they time their carbohydrates to their training, the anti-catabolic effect can be, again, very small, but over the course of 12 or 16 weeks of dieting, notable.
Okay, and then the parasympathetic side, and I want to come back to another follow-up question on that, but before I forget in my feeble brain. So you said it creates sort of a sympathetic tone when you have carbohydrates post-workout. Does that umbrella outside of just like, hey, it's more optimal for anabolism and whatnot, does it actually sort of cue your body to, hey, get into recovery mode?
Yes.
So it's like a cortisol blunting effect? Or
huge cortisol blunting effect. One of the most reliable ways to blunt cortisol is carbohydrate, which is funny because somebody was various folks back in a few years back were saying like, this the anti-cortisol diet, and they'd say it's got to be low in carbs, and I'm like, what the? You guys get
insulin
totally
blunts cortisol.
Backwards.
Yeah.
Insulin and carbohydrates blunt cortisol a ton, and that's kind of what you want to do. It's totally fine to have cortisol high while you're training, and as a matter of fact, it's just going to be a thing that hard training brings in lots of cortisol. I mean, it's stressful. There's no other way. You're doing hack squat for 5 plates for 6 sets of 15. There's some stress on you. Totally fine. Also, transient increases in cortisol don't predict anything except good results in the gym. Literally, it's how much cortisol you generate in a workout predicts how much gains you'll get from a workout better than testosterone changes. Because testosterone, if it goes up really fast and comes back down, it doesn't really do much. Neither does cortisol. But people who have really high cortisol secretion during training, they're the ones that are going really hard. However, chronic exposures to high levels of cortisol are no bueno because they are catabolic in that not so nice way. And so both from a psychological perspective and physiological perspective, the cessation of a workout is optimally replaced with a time of recovery, psycho and physiological recovery. And carbs bring in both. You have a big bowl of cereal with some protein after training. It's this woo-saw effect. You're psychologically more relaxed. You're physiologically, your parasympathetic activity is up, sympathetic is down. You want to be the opposite of fight or flight. Someone just reshared a quote of mine on Instagram that I must have said at some point, but it was like the best thing you can do after workout is go the home, sit the down, have a bunch of food and chill the out. That's what you do for recovery. And like you've been around a long time. People will do for recovery all kinds of wacky stuff. They'll be like, so was like treadmill running like at a light pace good for recovery? But like only if it replaces a hard run. But if you're putting it extra on top, that's just more stress. So carbohydrates post-workout absolutely do bring in a parasympathetic response. They help with it. And that response is critical psychologically and physiologically for giving you the best results and recovering you quick enough so that tomorrow or later that day when you train again, you'll have the most gusto that you can manage.
I found, when I was even strict keto for 5 or 6 years, I would train still at the same relative level of intensity.
Sure.
And I would end up just chronically stressed, right?
Yes.
Until I found that, well, hey, I could still have 50 grams of glucose after my workout and be back in ketosis in no time and relax. I feel like I wasn't in this sympathetic tone all day. It was like I was impossible to click out of it. It was like
so you felt it.
Oh, absolutely. I'm super in tune with that. I could feel that for sure. And it would impact sleep and then it would steamroll. You see a lot of people that are on low carb or keto, like they end up. And then, I don't want to digress too much into that, but then there's a very fine line between being in ketosis and being low carb. I call like low carb almost metabolic purgatory. You're like sitting in this state where you're not producing ketones yet. So you're not getting that benefit. You're just in this area.
You just feel like total.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of people, they put themselves there because they're not going all the way. They're just like, oh, low carb, carbs are bad, but they're not actually committing all the way.
Totally. There's something to be said for some people. You either just go into full keto or just do a normal diet.
Yep.
Low carb at the boundary layer of the bottom of that can feel not so great because your body's like always in that transition.
What am I doing?
The first week of keto typically sucks because you're in that transition the whole time. Some people stretch out an 8-week keto diet and be in that transition all 8 weeks. And they're like, keto sucks. And you're like, yeah, you were never in keto though, but no big deal.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's like you're filling up your glycogen reserves
with
maybe 50 or 75 grams or something. You're burning through it in 30 minutes of your workout, and then you're transitioning. Why am I bonking 30 minutes into my
weird.
workout?
It's like you engineered that.
Yeah, no. So, and then if we kind of come back to the the insulin being sort of parasympathetic, things like that. If you are trying to optimize sleep, along with kind of using these carbohydrates for timing. Like on one hand, you have some people that say, oh, you have carbohydrates, you get this, hypoglycemic dip later on, and then it can actually improve sleep onset. But then there's literature that shows it improves onset, but it actually messes you up later on. Mm-hmm. Is there an optimal time to time carbohydrates for sleep?
Yes, but it's different based on your dieting phase and what the glycogen and total fuel situation is. If you're in a hypocaloric diet and you're always less than, is by definition what you're trying to do, consuming a considerable bolus of carbohydrate, at least a decent one, in the meal before you go to sleep, an hour, 2 hours before sleep, can significantly put you in a parasympathetic state that you're not normally able to be in during the day because you're always hypocaloric. Being hypocaloric is the opposite of parasympathetic because your body's like, how am I supposed to recover? There's not enough food around. What the hell? And so a last meal of the day being higher in carbs in that context for many people, probably most, would work as a net enhancer of sleep ability. It puts you to sleep and then you don't have trouble staying in sleep. If you're eating a normal diet where you're not trying to lose weight, even trying to gain weight, carbohydrates before sleep can just give you too much energy and give you the carb sweats, and then you wake up soaking your sheets. Heart rate. What am I doing? Well, you're digesting food. You ate a lot of food. So there you want to keep the food volume low altogether. And you want enough protein to supply your body with that recovery fuel through the night. So you end up eating a higher protein, lower carb, lower fat meal in the evening if you're eating relatively normally, not trying to lose fat. So in a fat loss diet, experiment with having some more carbs in the evening. In a non-fat loss diet, try it. But if you see like, this isn't great, just have a mostly protein and fat, mostly protein of that meal before you go to bed, a few hours before you go to bed. Make sure that when you're going to bed, you're not feeling like, that feeling you just went to a Brazilian steakhouse and you're going to explode. Get that to go down a little. Then you go to sleep. It's going to work out a lot better.
Yeah. If I like little low fat cottage cheese and some pineapple or something for me, it's like, great. I feel really good. Just enough. I don't know. Just like if I start going above like 40, 50 grams of carbohydrates after like 5 p.m., it's just problematic for me for some reason.
Your body gets you into, hey, I've got energy. Let's go use this mode. And then you're just not very conducive to sleep.
So then last question on the side of the muscle building piece. Obviously, protein is going to be the priority, of course. But does combining protein and carbohydrates really do anything in that moment together for muscle anabolism? Or is it really the protein driving the biggest change?
So I think it's a combination of the protein and carbs. And this is something you can't get out of literature on anabolism by itself, because you need to look at the catabolic side of the equation. Muscle growth happens over time if you reduce catabolism to some extent and you increase anabolism. They've shown time and time again that injectable insulin doesn't really promote a whole lot of net anabolism, but it's a very powerful anti-catabolic driver. And any pro bodybuilder will tell you that injectable insulin is insanely anabolic in the sense of over the long term, it potentiates a lot of muscle growth. But it doesn't seem to do that much by growing extra muscle. It seems to do by saving extra muscle. So if you have just protein, let's say I just feed 50 grams of protein, some of that protein will go into getting anabolism started. Some will just be burned off for energy. If I throw in a 30-gram Gatorade shake into that meal, now it's 80 grams total nutrient. The carbohydrates are so anti-catabolic, so parasympathetic, they shuttle all that in, and you have the remaining all of that 50 grams of protein to go into the muscle machinery. So if you compare them the right way, carbs can be a huge we'll take care of this part thing for you so that all the protein you're eating go to the right spot. Can you overcome that by eating just way more protein? Sure. But then why are you going out of your way to get rid of a nutrient that's already tailor-made for this exact purpose? So there is a synergistic effect of protein and carbs, and that increased bolus of carbohydrate will have those anti-catabolic parasympathetic increasing effects that protein alone might not have. So if I was a gambling man, I'd bet that a mixed diet of carbs plus protein, even calorie equated, does better for long-term muscle gain than a diet of almost exclusively protein.
I can see that.
And in the literature,
cheaper too.
It's cheaper. It's more fun. You can eat it more places. It's just all upsides unless you're psychotically driven to consume a ton of protein and nothing else. And then I don't really know what to say because like, rock on.
But it's almost like a best way, if what I'm gathering from this, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like in general protein consumption, it's like, okay, it's always going to be a 2 steps forward, 1 step back because it's a balance of muscle protein breakdown and synthesis, right? 2 steps forward, you eat the protein, but then you have that 1 step back because you're still going to have breakdown. It's like you almost, when you have some carbs along with your protein, you're almost making it more like 2 steps forward, half a step back.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so. And they potentiate your training and they help your sleep and they improve your mood. They're excellent for cognition. Again, carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source of the brain. All those benefits together. Keto is dope if you have a compelling reason to do it. But if you don't have a compelling reason to do keto or low carb, consider some adequate carbohydrate because it has some really good effects.
I like your approach on that because you don't demonize the keto angle. There's a lot of people that thrive on it.
A lot of people love it. I've used it and it was great.
And I found just like once I got to the level of leanness I wanted to be at, other than the occasional, I definitely get a cognitive boost from it. But I don't know if it's directly from the ketones or more stable blood sugar at that point. Who knows? But it's bottom line is that now that I'm leaner, it's way more advantageous for me to periodically dose the carbohydrates appropriately.
Yes.
And it's I still love keto. I still feel great on it. I don't feel better or worse on one or the other, but I do notice that now that I'm leaner, I probably just have less to pull from.
Yes.
And that's just
your body's like, dude, give us a carb, please, bro. Yeah.
Well, man, where can everyone find you?
Renaissance Periodization, RP Strength on YouTube, Dr. Mike Muscle, search that. You'll find my face and hopefully I won't disappoint you terribly with what you find.
Right on, man. Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much.